Thanks for coming back. First
No
app
worries.
was a rager. People loved it. I loved it. It was so educational. And I think we have a ton of questions that just to keep talking nutrition, get it dialed.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is like, it's so hard to take nutritional advice out of context and to make it accessible for the masses because everybody has their own little takeaways that they'll take. And then some people will kind of have an idea, other people won't have an idea, and they try to apply it and they think, oh, well, I did what you said in the podcast, but I still feel like crap. And then you actually look a little bit deeper, and like their sleep is horrific, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, they're susceptible to in what do you call it, illnesses all the time because they've just been doing it for so long, so wrong. And it's so hard to like give advice, give numbers even to people and then expect it to be their saving grace.
Right. And I think that there's all those other factors, even things of, well, I don't know, I fueled, but I felt really tired. I said, well, you just did a 3 hour ride with VO2 max intervals. You should feel tired. The nutrition does not make you superwoman.
No.
So I think yeah. And then there's also the people that take shortcuts that there were a lot of recommendations. Well, wait, what's this number? I said, you didn't watch the video. You can't, I mean, you
Mm.
gotta pay attention. So,
And you did mention about the Discord question, and you know somebody maybe interpreting it as if it's a good idea to restrict carbohydrates after a ride. And that was obviously a gross misinterpretation. Obviously, it's obviously nothing that it's never what I would recommend. And that's where it gets a little bit confusing, and you really have to like look at what they're kind of doing the whole time.
mhm. Yeah, so let's jump in. We have a bunch of questions. Thank you to everybody that submitted some, and then I have a bunch of carb loading questions. I think the first one that, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, when we're talking about adding electrolytes to do-it-yourself drink mix, salt. Someone wrote in, hey, salt might be okay, but what about the lack of potassium, magnesium, and calcium? Now, what do you feel about this? Because there is some research that shows those are not necessary and that it is just the sodium piece. Do you think that we need to be adding these other three, potassium, magnesium, calcium, for people that are making their do it their own drink mix?
I think it's worth it because I mean, it's all going to be depicted or depending on what your sweat rate is, and but there is a general concentration of all those electrolytes in sweat. So if you have a high sweat rate, there is going to be some depletion there. Now, I know that link that you sent me kind of alluded to that there wasn't much depletion of say magnesium and I think it was potassium, but we do know that for prolonged periods of time, if you're sweating profusely all the time, you could be at risk for magnesium depletion. And like, if it's not going to be a case of you add it in your electrolyte mix, then supplementing it might be more convenient. This guy mentioned calcium in particular. And I mean, if you do eat dairy, like if you do have a good intake of calcium that meets the minimum requirement for calcium intake throughout the day, then it's probably not worth maybe you supplementing uh,
Mm-hmm.
with electrolyte in your drink mixes. But say for me, I can't go near dairy with Bart's pull, like lactose containing dairies. I mean, so I would have to include it into my electrolyte mix because that's what I need. But it all depends really on what their
Right.
natural dietary intake is anyway.
Well, so then also, if you're using Himalayan pink salt, that is 98% sodium chloride and 2% of the
Mm-hmm.
trace minerals that include those. Do you think in that 2% there might be enough? Like, how do we know? I mean,
Without
without testing, you
really
got to get tested
getting
or,
bloods done and testing your mineral content for all these various things. There are various like symptoms that could show up that if you're magnesium depleted or that, but you'd have to be really magnesium depleted for any of those kind of symptoms um of of those to kind of show up. And but because they're so important for muscle contraction and muscle function, like I think it's better to hedge your bets and just say, well, I'll add it to my drink mixes because I need it. And if I know I have a really sweaty sweat rate.
Yeah. Ugh. I don't want to have to add something, but maybe I'll go back to it.
Go
We'll
ahead.
see. TBD. We won't belabor that one. Big
Okay.
question. That's, I think, what are the basic gram per kilogram body weight recommendations for protein after a long ride or hard lift session? And then maybe also, what about just during a normal train, maybe like an endurance day?
So it depends on, okay, I'll always depend,
I
Brendan. This
know.
is going to be the topic of the day, right? So what kind of phase is the athlete in, right? If they are in a strength phase and maybe they're wanting to target growing lean muscle mass, then their overall protein intake shouldn't be anything less than, say, again, it all depends on what their training load is for that day, right? But I would like to see it above 2 grams per kilo. Okay.
Mhm.
Then if they are in a calorie deficit and they can manage it with respect to their overall calorie intake and their carbohydrate and fat needs on that day, then ideally I'd like to keep that as close to 2 as possible. But 1.8 is a good starting point. Um, I like to kind of structure plans around food, not so much about these. Well, I guess I kind of am. I'm just kind of naturally doing it. But then so after, but specifically after resistance training, that's 0.3 grams per kilo of protein. Or is it 0.5? Holy God, I can't remember. But anyways, it's something around 30 grams, right? Now,
Yeah.
and that obviously has
You're
to be
talking about
from,
right after the session.
yeah, right after the session.
Okay. Yeah. Not
Um,
total for the day.
no, that's in the sort of the 30 to 60 minutes after a session. And
Got
then
it.
obviously your other 30 grams or 30 or 40 grams per in your like a recovery meal. So that's where the protein shakes can come in handy. Now that's for a resistance session. Okay. Your priority after resistance, a strength session is full on protein delivery, like fast release protein that'll go straight to the muscle and repair all the little damage that you've done. Then, but for a really high intensity or a really long duration bike ride, obviously the priority for that session is carbohydrate
Mhm.
replenishment. And the protein in there isn't so much, there's not a lot of muscle damage that actually happens when you've done like a long endurance ride. There obviously is some micro damage, but not quite as much obviously from strength session. So your priority there is your carbohydrate replenishment with some protein. So usually it's that 3-to-1 carbs to protein, which is usually works out about 20 grams of protein post ride,
And like
immediately
how many
post
grams of
ride.
carb and how many grams of carbs post ride?
Well, if it's 3-to-1, then that's 20 to 80, no, 60 grams.
Okay. I'm even doing more, especially if I have like and I guess that, but again, it depends. What do you do in the next day? So that
Yeah.
play that in. Okay.
Yeah. And what have you eaten in the hours before? Like if it's a really, so I've just gotten off a call with a girl who has to train really late in the evening and she wants to go to bed as quickly as possible. So uh, we're actually structuring it so that she can preload that carbon protein mix, suppose, before her ride. Then she can get her recovery meal immediately after, like within that 30 minutes, and then can go to bed as quickly as possible rather than having the recovery shake, then the recovery meal, and then have to go to bed. So it's just about where the training fits in the day as well.
So here's an interesting thing. There's a podcast you might want to listen to with Tim Podlegar. Do you know him?
Yeah.
Podlegar
Yeah.
from Slovenia, and he was on Pro Tri News, and he has a study that came out last year where they were looking at the difference in 90 grams or 120 grams an hour, and does it help delay the amount of glycogen that we use? And there was no
Mm-hmm.
glycogen sparing if you ate more carbs, and so he's had this hypothesis that he dropped very quickly. He had this line where he's like, well, your pre-activation ride, since glycogen is our preferred fuel source, if you have a race the next day, you want to do this ride as early as possible because you're using the glycogen. That's the whole point of carb loading. So
Yeah.
your carb loading starts after that ride. And so I'm like, damn, if I drive somewhere and then do an openers ride, I'm tapping way more glycogen than I should be. Like maybe I should be actually doing the ride before I drive. I got into a little quick conversation on Instagram with him because we won't go open this can of worms, but it's interesting to think of how timing of any exercise can affect our carb loading. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, it's interesting. And I think at the end of the day though, like you just said, you need to make this work as best as possible with your life scenario. So even if it's not perfect,
Yeah.
it's better than not thinking about it and trying to plan, or like, well, I'm not going to eat it all because I'm going to use my glycogen. I'm going to try and eat 2,000 calories at 10 p.m. and then go to bed. Now you wrecked your sleep and not, so I think that's super smart and helping an athlete through that, because nutrition can be so confusing.
Like that sleep flow study where they basically exercise working muscles to exhaustion before bed, they replenish with a moderate amount of carbohydrate, put them to sleep, and then exercise them fasted in the morning, right? There's this study and it upregulates PGC1 alpha, which is master regulator for endurance adaptations, right? And that study, if I was to try and get some athletes to do that, they'd be like, no chance, Ellen, am I going to bed hungry and then going to do a session in the morning? Like there's so much confusion around that kind of thing. And I think sleep, it's not really recorded. It's not recorded as part of that study that, yes, their sleep probably was disrupted. However, the ratings of perceived exertion in that hour-long fasted session that they do in the morning is markedly increased
way
versus
higher
when they were obviously fed and did replenish their carbohydrates after the session the night before. But God, imagine, like, I mean, the studies they use various things, right, and how to actually deplete glycogen as much as possible so that the muscle is empty of glycogen. And like it could be anywhere between like 3 by 8 minutes at sort of threshold, or a couple of maximal sprints. But either way, if it's depleted and then you have to go to bed, like I just think it's a nasty place to be.
Yeah, I can't. Sleeping super hungry sounds terrible. Speaking of, what are your carb loading recommendations?
Oh, I have so much fun with carb loading people.
Yes.
Honestly,
Let me ask you first. Do you believe in carb? Is carb loading necessary,
do I
is
believe
it
in it? It's like
beneficial?
saying, I don't know what. Anyway, sorry, ask that question again.
Is it beneficial to carb load?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Any session longer than 90 minutes, you can benefit from it. Depends. Like if you want to get the most out of yourself and you feel like you can, if you've done all your training and you've made the sacrifices to show up to a race and it's longer than 90 minutes, I would say do as much as you possibly can to get to that race with as much fuel available to you as you possibly can, so you can finish in the best.
People think I'm crazy. I carb load for crits when I'm warming up, I'm racing an hour, and then if I do 2, I have to wait around for an hour or 2 hours, kind of re-warm up and do another. So if I do double crits, I talk to them like, oh, I'm definitely carb loading. They said it's 2 1-hour races. I said it's 2 1-hour races with 2 30-minute warm-ups and 2 hours in between. Like, okay,
oh yeah, full on carb loading territory for me.
I'm gonna
By the way,
hard.
the first thing I was supposed to say to you was congratulations on the national jersey.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mega.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right.
Super
Took me way too long, considering you have it in the background there.
Yeah. I might just start draping them around the house. It's actually, I put one in my closet. Oh, what did I drop here? No, I put one in my closet. I've had some in this drawer that I'll keep these. I don't really wear them that often. But I hung one up and I was like, this is just a good reminder every morning. Like, let's go. Let's freaking stay focused.
Absolutely. I 100% believe in that. This is going to sound so big-headed, but I created a montage of all the video clips of me either getting interviewed, winning a race, or getting on the podium, right? And I've put that into a little video clip. And I replay that to myself before a race, thinking, yes, you can. Yeah, yes, you definitely can. You've done it in the past. See, look.
Yeah.
So as many reminders that you can get of that.
Yeah. I think most athletes have a problem with, I had coaches that instilled confidence and the mental side of things. And we're getting off nutrition real quick, but it's just that important. And you have to be able to convince yourself before the race that you have a chance to win, or whatever your win is going to be. Or when things get really hard, there's going to be that thing in your show that says, that girl's better than you. She's going to drop you.
Pick
Okay,
her
you know
up.
what? She's supposed to ride away. Never mind. And screw that. Believe in yourself. We put in all this time. We put in all this effort. Everyone's, super focused and trying to dial their game in. Believe in yourself. You deserve it. You're worth it. All right.
Brendan, I've literally had a couple of consultations with a mental coach that literally talk word for word about those little demons on my shoulder that tell you, no, you're not good enough. And honestly, like that is a whole different podcast. We won't even go into it. So let's go back, circle back.
I want to jump on that though, because somebody asked me in another podcast, what do you do to cope when you're doing really hard workouts? When it starts, there is that thing that always says, do you really want to do this today? Like, this is fun. And it's like, no, shut up. I want to do this because I want to try and beat so-and-so. I want to try and get on the level of so-and-so. And I think of people that inspire me. So it's like, okay, carb loading.
Yes. So let's dive into that. Okay. So let's say you've got your session and you've got your event and it's longer than 90 minutes. Okay. Depending on how long it is, I might actually do a couple of days, maybe 1 or 2 days. There are other considerations for that week, again, depending on how long it is, especially for runners. We might try and minimize their fiber intake during the week. If I know they have some trouble with dairy, I would probably start eliminating that during the week as well. But mostly...
Can I ask you a question on that? Sorry, I just want to jump in because this is the number one pushback that I hear from athletes, and I feel like fiber makes you go to the bathroom really well.
Oh, yeah.
And I almost want to test this, but I love fiber. Do athletes ever say, hey, I'm like pooping less, or I have like my normal routine is now like off? Because the 2 poops to podium, if you poop twice in the morning of a bike race, you're probably going to win. It's like proven.
Oh.
No, like, but I'm just, this is a real thing. People have
is this to a maximum or to a minimum? Anyway, yes, to answer your question, 100%.
Minimum. But I think that, does it throw people off their normal schedule? I think most athletes are regular in that realm.
Yeah, no, it can. And this is why you kind of want to keep that,
as opposed to saying, let's take this fiber out to maybe, I mean, do you see that big of a weight decrease that it's beneficial since you are holding on to more water with the carb loading?
There's a couple of different things that are helping with the fiber reduction. Okay. So yes, it will potentially, we see, this is the thing, it's kind of all anecdotal as well, right? So one guy I had who was doing a bunch of back-to-back races over in Spain, and he decided, I'm racing sort of every second or third day, so I'll just take out fiber all the time and just completely carbs. I get a message saying, Ellen, I haven't pooped in 6 days.
Whoa!
I'm like, what have you done? What have you done?
Yeah,
kind of thing, right? And that is not good. He was feeling bloated. He was feeling like obviously needed to go. So I'm like, get on the prunes, get on the pears kind of thing. And within seconds, it was just like, okay, I'm fixed now. So he was taking it to extreme. Okay. But that was just a kind of a, well, I want to raise my best every single day here. So this is what I think will help, but it's not going to help over such a long period of time. The fiber intake is not generally the whole week. It hopefully, for me, I would say a couple of days, but some people will actually, I've had a couple of guys who follow the carb loading protocol that I create, and they actually will poop out like a lot on those days because everything's just kind of getting pushed through because of the vast quantities of everything, right? And fiber slows down the passage of food through the colon or through digestive tract, so that it can kind of, well, it depends on what type of fiber it is, obviously, but the roughage type things, like say the celery strings or what else, the skins in orange and that kind of stuff, that'll kind of scrub out everything and push it out, rather than say other things like oats that kind of swell up and create a lot of bulk and then they'll come out. So to answer your question there, the fiber intake, that's kind of maybe a personal thing. However, if they have issues with digestion on a day, say for runners in particular, and they are likely, or they have experienced some kind of runner's diarrhea symptoms in the past, it's better for them to make sure they have a completely cleared digestive tract before their event because they don't want anything lingering in there that can cause havoc during
So
the
do you
event.
have to like not eat? I don't know anything about this with running. Like, do you not eat for a
No, it's
little bit?
not eating. It's just minimizing fiber intake.
Okay.
But there's a whole host of things that you
I think
might want to consider as part of that.
I think the biggest headline for this part of the podcast is test this on yourself, everybody. Figure out what
Oh
works
yeah.
for you. You
Oh
know,
yeah. I would never
that goes
send
with
anybody.
anything, but really
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, don't try this new poop strategy the day before a big race.
Yeah,
Like,
no, I won't give anybody a pre-race day template or plan if they can't practice it the day and during training at
got
some
it.
point. Again, their race day breakfast, they have to practice it a couple of times before they can before they actually go into a race. So my recommendation is generally just for handiness, because it's so easy for me to plan it this way, is 10 grams per kilo of carbohydrate. Simple carbohydrates, minimal fiber, like cereal. Go ahead.
Is this for 3 hours and 6 hour events? No matter what's duration?
Yeah, no, it kind of goes back to what I said there about depending on how long it is.
Yeah.
They, for somebody doing an Ironman, and again, it depends on what time of day it starts at as well. Like when they're doing their activation ride, when a couple of different factors. If it's starting at the crack of dawn on the day of the event, 2 days before is definitely a good idea. If it's starting sort of mid-morning where you have a chance to use those hours to fuel up properly as well. Depends on how big of a breakfast they can have. So there's a couple of different factors there depending on how long it is.
But how long does it take for it to actually, the food that you eat to be stored as glycogen is going to take at least 12 hours, right? So
Well,
like,
that's a very specific question.
so I think that I would look at it as, hey, I'm going to try, and even if it's at 7 a.m. or 12 p.m., I would be, in my head, and this might be wrong, I'm going to get my glycogen store sorted. And then the food that I eat that morning is more dependent on like the exogenous carbs that are just like floating around in there. Like it's not becoming glycogen. So
well, your blood can only really tolerate like 4 grams of glycogen at any, or sorry, of carbohydrate. Yeah, no, of glycogen, of glucose. At any time, that's what it likes to be stable at. So, provided your insulin is doing its job properly, it should be working as often as possible to get those carbohydrates that are circulating in the blood into storage. So one of your questions was, does every gram of carbohydrate get stored as glycogen for a carb loading protocol, right? So if I have somebody who I have them only eating maybe 8 grams per kilo of carbohydrate on a training day, then if I up that to 10 grams per kilo, obviously that's, oh God, maths. Say for me, that's only 2 more grams per kilo, which for me is 120 grams, right? So ideally you can get people from say 4 or 500 grams in the muscle to 800 grams, right? So that's an extra 400 grams there that you could have eaten, that you could have stored, right? The key thing about it is the type of food, okay? So if I say to somebody, okay, you have to eat 10 grams per kilo of carbohydrate tomorrow, they're like, okay, right, I can do that. So they go off and they have their cereal and milk, and that's fine. And then they'll go to the shop and they'll pick up some chocolate and some donuts and some pastries. And they say, okay, yeah, that's got 20 grams per kilo or 20 grams, and that's got 40 grams. But they don't realize that the donut's probably full of fat. The chocolate is the wrong type of carbohydrate, not the wrong type of carbohydrate, but there's so much fat in it that is accommodating far too many calories for the carbs to be the priority. Okay. Yeah. So the fats obviously are going to slow down stomach emptying, as I said before, and the delivery of those carbohydrates into circulation and then into storage. And the fats are just going to take up so many calories that you would be massively overfeeding on that day. Yes. And that's when it becomes a problem.
So how do you like this? What I usually tell people, especially if they don't have a lot of experience with carb loading, I say, lean your diet towards carbs, meaning if you have never done this, you don't have to eat that much more, but instead of having salmon and veggies, have the pasta that night. Choose carbs, and then maybe at night have a little bit of extra bowl of rice. So they're not really carb loading because they're not familiar with it. They're just shifting towards carbs, which kind of goes along with what you're saying. Like, don't pick all these fatty things. That's not, that's like your celebration. If you love chocolate after your event, go eat the chocolate then. But like, that's not going to fuel you. And there are products out there that people send me these labels. And I said, dude, look, this one thing has 17% of your daily recommendation for fat. And you're going to eat that on the bike ride? That's not going to make you fast. You want rocket fuel.
But depending on what type of ride they're doing, and look, absolutely for an event today. But even so, now you can say lean towards carbs, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, to get the benefit of carb loading, you may as well just follow the whole thing, and stick to big bowls of rice and honey, or Cocoa Pops with low fat milk and.
Cocoa Puffs have some weird things in them. I'm just gonna say that.
White bread, fire in.
Sugar. Yeah, there's because I've been on this very no preservative thing, and I actually posted a video from our conversation about eat the sugar, and I held up a bag of Swedish fish that I bought at this little store on a ride, which I normally try to avoid. It has red dye, whatever. It's got another funky thing. It's not pure sugar. And so I was like, someone's going to call me on the thumbnail. Nobody did. So you missed it. But yeah, I think clean. Anyways, okay. So carb loading, can we put out there, taking in all of these variations, 8 to 10 grams per 1 kilogram of body weight? Is that our final? Or
10 to 12.
So you're going to go 12? See, I like 12.
I went 12.
Now let me ask you this. What do you feel that makes it very hard to stay within the not overeating? Is it okay to overeat then for that one day?
This is a funny one, right? Because it goes back to what you said about Puglagar,
Timmy Tim.
Yeah, okay, we'll call him that.
Yeah. He's probably like, you don't even know me, dude. Don't call me Timmy Tim.
Who? And what he says about carbohydrate usage, obviously, when you are in that carb loading, right? So obviously, if you've got hundreds of grams of carbohydrate available to you, your muscle's going to be like, oh yes, I'm going to use all of that. And your carbohydrate utilization during the session, say your activation session, will be upregulated. So you're going to be kind of tapping into those stores quite a lot more than if you were to have just followed a kind of a normal diet beforehand. So I tend to follow what you said about keeping your activation in the morning and then using the window of opportunity afterwards to really maximize carbohydrate replenishment there, because all those glycogen stores pathways are so massively upregulated, and take on quite a lot. I overfuel that session, that activation session on that morning, and then follow the rest of it. Now, there is that 1 day study where because there's obviously a couple of different types of carb loading strategies. Initially, it was 3 days of carbohydrate depletion, followed by 3 days of carbohydrate supercompensation. Then
which we know is not true, correct?
Yeah, absolutely not required whatsoever. Yeah. So, but there is that 1 day study where they don't actually do any exercise at all the day before. Follow this 10 to 12 grams per kilo, and arrive at the session fully glycogen stored on that day. So, and I've had athletes who don't have the opportunity to do activation rides the day before, and for that 1 day, yes, they will be eating a lot more, but their fat intake is going to be really low. And it has to be super, super low. Their protein intake is just a moderate amount of protein. It can't be anything like what we'd usually have. And most of the calories are coming from carbohydrate there.
So you're saying that you should be able to stay within a relatively close target for the day?
It depends on what your target is.
Okay. I mean, I guess
I would say yes. Obviously, I'm doing it. So people, and I'm planning it in for people, and absolutely, they're staying within their sort of calorie targets for those days. But the the priority at that point isn't really calorie targets. It's their performance the day afterwards.
Right. Okay.
And
So that's what I wanted to hear. Like,
yeah.
screw if you go over a surplus of 1,500 calories, it's going to make you
Mm.
faster. And then what would they do? Just maybe say, hey, did I gain a little weight? Do I just knock off a few hundred for the next week or so?
Yeah, but and then it's the pooping thing as well. Like if they can clear out their colon during the day before because they're having such a volume of food, but all the glycogen has kind of been stored, then there's that kind of weight that maybe is coming out as well. I mean,
so they shouldn't feel like they're gaining a ton of weight by.
oh gosh, no.
Okay. Okay. We had a quick question. We've kind of hit carbs a lot, but someone had asked about fueling not only for workouts and endurance events, but how does this impact my overall health? What do you have is this bad for overall health? And maybe give like a 60-second blurb on,
Was that the fructose element?
No, this was the guy talking about Dr. Lustig, talking about carbs being converted to triglycerides and his are high when he's on carbs, but when he's fat adapted, he can drop them.
Yeah, no, and I remember, yeah. The what I'd love to get people to do a lot of is metabolic testing, like, and actually see what their fuel preference is at rest and at any given intensity when they're exercising. Because obviously, predominantly at rest, it should be relatively higher in fats. Okay, that's what you should be burning more of. Then if they can do a metabolic test, they can literally see how many grams of carbohydrate they would be burning. And they could tailor everything just exactly to that output, that graph that would show you your fat utilization and your carbohydrate utilization. There's you might have heard them, the insight test. I don't know how you feel about them, but yeah, I know, but like they are a really good visual, and like I've seen so many of them at this point where you can see that, like, for really glycolytic athletes, you can see that their carb utilization far exceeds their fat oxidation at any given point. So for someone like that, you'd be able to really refine their carb intake depending on what they needed.
So with carb loading,
just give me 1 second.
This is where I play elevator background music.
I'm
trying to change your lighting.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't realize the sun was so darn bright. It's like
so. Let me ask you this: when we're talking about carb loading, you had said that carbs will then be more the preferred fuel source when you have carb loaded. Does that mean that we're going to undergo more glycolysis and become more glycolytic, therefore creating more hydrogen ions from that breakdown of fuel, which would technically make us less efficient sometimes we could do more work, but some of that work could be dangerously costly to our performance. Like,
yeah, no, that's an interesting one, because you've got more. I think I've just made that worse, haven't I? What's it? So what you're saying there is that you've got more carbohydrate available to you, so you're automatically going to be more glycolytic. So
I don't know the answer.
Necessarily, you burn native carbohydrates as well, more so than glycolytic pathways. So, and obviously glycolysis is kind of the preemptive for all of this, but the lactate or the hydrogen ion production from that, I don't know.
I've asked this question many times, and people are always like, but, well, in theory, I mean, it doesn't make sense because carb loading works, but I have not found the answer. Maybe I'll ask Tim also. I haven't found the answer of why this is not true. Like, if we're using more carbs, we should be creating a surplus of hydrogen ions, which, as everyone knows, is what makes us feel that, ooh, ow, this is hard. This is hard.
Not via the oxidative pathways, though. Yes, glycolysis is the first step to oxidating or combusting carbohydrate, but if you damn you caught me out there. I don't mind saying that. Yeah, you caught me out.
No, it's good. It's not calling out.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, are there any differences in what people should be doing to getting to the end of a longer race with gas in the tank?
Well, that's kind of fueling and carb loading, really, and making
Okay.
sure
That's
they're
sorry.
keeping top of their
I
hydration
meant to
and
say like
everything.
that tacks on to that topic. I just want to make sure, is there anything else that we need to touch on that? Because I know that
Oh,
was one.
no, I
No.
think, yeah, no. I think the carb loading strategy and then making sure you know what your fueling, your intra right fueling is. That's the main thing there.
Okay. What about managing weight loss without losing power?
Well, that goes back to the protein element and the carbohydrate periodization. So you're not taking on excess carbohydrate when you are not training, and you're keeping those really high carb meals for around training or the evening before a big training ride. We're only talking about training here, not really competing. Then if you prioritize, well, it kind of goes back to that inside test that I was telling you about. So
Do you use inside?
I have done it, yeah.
Okay.
And it was a proper eye opener into the type of training that I could be doing to maximize my, or at least to kind of calm down my glycolytic pathways.
Do you use
Because
WKO for your training at all?
my coach does, yeah. And
What's your VLA max at? Do you know off the top of your head? I would just be curious.
je ne sais pas. No, I don't.
It's a decimal number. It's like I'd just be curious where it falls. But my only thing with inside was that
Yeah. Well, no, see, that's the
I
thing. It
had a
came
bunch
out
of
from the
people.
inside test, though. I wonder.
Yeah,
Yeah, it definitely came out in the inside test. But yeah, no, it was high. Like
okay,
it was too high for like the what you call it, the events that I'm doing. Okay.
cool.
So that's why I found it so useful. And seeing that at my, say, fat max, which is defined as the maximum amount of carbohydrates that you can use.
That
Sorry, it's when, oh God, I never get it right, but it's when your carb max, or when your fat oxidative
is the highest.
oxidation peaks out, basically.
There you go.
And sorry, I don't know why I'm trying to explain that to you, but
No, it's good. I didn't mean it that way. I was just like fat max. That
yeah,
says it
well,
all right
yeah,
there.
it's a good way of saying it,
The
isn't it?
most fat
But
burn.
but
Yeah.
mine was happening at such a low power output,
Hmm.
and obviously if you are at that power output, say if mine was like 130 watts, right? If that's the highest intensity that I can use the most amount of fats, then at that intensity, I'm actually using quite a lot of carbohydrate, obviously, to fuel the calories per hour, right? So for me to see that, I was like, well, I kind of need to work on that, because it does mean that I will just chow down through my carbohydrate stores at a rate of knots. And even if I was to eat like 300 or like 120 grams of carbs per hour, I was never going to keep on top of it. And that's kind of why I found it so useful, because it meant that I could work on that over a winter of training, and sort of prioritize training around that to improve that adaptation.
And are you going to be doing really long events, or what are you training for?
Yeah, I've got the Gravel Worlds next in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
That's a long event.
Yeah.
I think it's a long event anyways. Maybe it's not long to you.
No, I don't know how long will it take.
Well, the UCI one that we did in Scotland was 4 hours.
Okay.
So I'm kind of assuming they're all going to be around the same.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That'd be awesome. Good luck.
But your question there, what was your actual question?
Just managing weight loss without losing power.
Oh, yeah. Protein, basically distributing protein throughout the day, making sure that it's coming from really high quality sources. Like plant-based athletes really need to know what a high quality protein source is for them. Their protein intake requirements are going to be naturally higher, because protein from plant sources is not as bioavailable. So say, for example, if I have a protein requirement for this meal and it's 30 grams of protein, then for plant-based proteins, it should be 40. They need to know how to combine their protein sources so that they're getting a complete amino acid profile. Leucine is is a trigger basically for muscle protein growth. So if a diet is kind of pretty much low in that, then your muscle turnover is going to be too high And if you're in a calorie deficit, you're just going to be losing muscle mass. So it's always a priority for protein intake to retain lean muscle.
Do you think it's possible to really lose weight during the race season, or is this something that really needs to be focused on before?
That's a really good question. And that kind of depends on the athlete and what their previous history is with their weight. If they are someone who is susceptible to yo-yoing weight throughout their lives, throughout their like athletic career, then I would say for them focusing on the winter to prioritize body composition is their best bet. Then during the race season, they're never going to be in a calorie deficit, because to put them in a calorie deficit they would start to expect things. They would expect the weight to be coming off. And if it didn't come off, then that would eke into their psyche and they would get a little bit mentally unprepared for their racing.
See, it comes in even to weight
loss.
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
Mindset is huge.
Yeah.
Huge. It can be crippling or it can be empowering. What's your thoughts on caffeine for athletes?
It can be rocket fuel.
Okay.
And
dosage, timing.
The dosage, well, timing is depends on what it is, right? So if you're using caffeine gum, 15 minutes is fine to have it before your event or before the required benefit. That's the main thing there. For tablets or for tablets, you have to kind of have it an hour before because it has to go through digestion. Whereas with gum, it's going straight into circulation via your gums.
Wait, so what about in a gel? How fast does that hit?
In a gel, that's a good one. It doesn't have to be digested. It doesn't have to be broken down. I'd say somewhere in the middle, half an hour, maybe 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then obviously the dosage there is some evidence that like 3 milligrams per kilo. Sorry, 3 milligrams per kilo. Milligrams.
Like, hello.
Milligrams. Sorry.
Warning, you're going to die.
Oh God, the shakes. 3 grams per kilo is enough, but milligrams per kilo. But I would kind of tend towards the 5 milligrams per kilo. Anything over 6 isn't really going to give you any benefit.
This is total for the day?
Oh no, for that dosage before the required benefit. Yeah, so
3, I'd be taking a 240. I'm 80 kgs. That is a mega. If I take 75, I feel that. Some people are going to be more susceptible to it than others. I am very sensitive to caffeine.
Habitual caffeine drinkers will probably have less of a benefit, and for those people I would say going caffeine free for the 7 days before your event to get more of a benefit on the day is a good idea. One of
my questions. That sounds terrible though.
But you say you're quite sensitive to caffeine.
Well, I only drink like 2 cups of coffee, and when I say sensitive, I mean I just feel it a lot. So if I drink caffeine late, it affects my sleep. I don't need much in a gel. When I first started drinking coffee, this was after I got in coffee late in life, which is probably a good thing. And I had a mocha pot. I don't even know where I got this thing. I'm like, oh, mocha pot. And it makes a little coffee. I don't really know what espresso was. So I take all this coffee, I put it in the mocha pot, and out comes, I poured a cup of espresso. And so I was drinking this and I was crashing so hard in the afternoon. I'm like, I don't know if caffeine is like really for me. My friend came over to my house. He said, wait a minute. I heard you just started drinking coffee. Are you drinking this? And I said, hey, he's like, so how much water are you putting in? I said, putting in water? What do you mean? I said, I'm making that, I'm pouring in a cup. He said, are you drinking this whole thing? And it was the big mocha. He's like, dude, that's like 8 shots of espresso. And you've gone from 0 to however many shots.
Brendan, oh man. Did you sleep for a week?
But I was getting like sad. It was the afternoon. I was like, I'm not happy right now. And it's just like a mega, it's so, now, not the smartest
this is person. And people are going to be affected in different ways, right? And this is the key thing. You really need to practice caffeine and training. Same with bicarb or etanol, and not so much, but same with bicarb. Like if you start taking, say for example, for me, 5 milligrams per kilo for me, I think is about 300 milligrams. I can't remember. anyway, but I usually take two. No, I don't usually. I I'd have two caffeine gums generally, say before a crit, and they're generally 50 milligrams or maybe 100 milligrams. But I have to space them out. And there is something, I had a chat with my teammate about this over the weekend, but I think there's something to do maybe with the caffeine gum that means you don't get as much of a crash from the caffeine afterwards. I don't know if that's in the literature at any point, right? But
sorry, I mean to cut you off there. You're done. Go ahead.
But definitely with, say, caffeine tablets, if you take all of them in the one go, then sort of the caffeine crash that you get after that is a bit sad. Yeah.
And I heard that like the actual caffeine versus caffeine in coffee is different. Like the synthetic is more beneficial to endurance athletes. Like coffee's good, but it's the caffeine, whatever it is
it's caffeine and anhydrous.
Yeah,
but it just means this caffeine's dehydrated. It's obviously just more concentrated, and and it's like it doesn't have anything else. It doesn't have, like, say, the tannins that are in coffee, or it doesn't have any of the other stuff that is in coffee.
So do you reduce your caffeine the week before?
No, impossible.
Okay, thank you. I was like,
I'd like to say I'm like craving but I just
right now. I'm like, I gotta wean off this stuff. Get out of here.
I definitely could have a detox after, say, we did a stage race there 2 weeks ago, and I definitely could have done with a caffeine detox after that race, but I think I lasted a day. And I just like it so much. It's so darn tasty.
Yeah, I heard that somebody a long time ago, before like social media was a thing, somebody was talking about like taking they do a week or two after the season to let their adrenal glands, like, I don't know if that's
yeah, definitely. And hormones as well. Hormones aren't the biggest fan of high doses of caffeine. So
maybe, I would do this during my off-season break, but I'm gonna go to Chicago and I'm gonna be like eating stuff and wanting to drink like more coffee because it's like vacation, and that's like the only really way I can rage now. So I don't know.
Yeah, but it's a personal preference, like, but absolutely, like, there is definitely the research to show that if you do reduce it, or like kind of minimize it, take it out, eliminate it, that's the word I'm looking for, eliminate it in the lead up to a key event, you will have more performance benefit on the day. Now that kind of stands to reason then if you are a habitually high caffeine taker, that maybe you need more on the day to get the performance benefit from it.
What about cramping? Do you think that is ever caffeine related, or do you think it's just a sodium electrolyte thing, or just stress on the muscles and you haven't done those efforts and the muscles saying, sorry, not today?
I'm not sure about the caffeine aspect.
Okay.
No, I'm not sure about the caffeine aspect, right? But there are so many things, right? Obviously, electrolyte imbalances is one of them. But the central nervous fatigue, this is kind of why it mostly happens for the people who get cramp because of fatigue of the mind. So your brain is misfiring those connections that stimulate muscle contraction and what's the opposite of contraction? I can never remember it. Anyway, it's going longer and shorter. Right. And so if central fatigue is the factor, then for those athletes, so they basically need a bit of a stimulus to what, you know, when you give a shock to somebody who's in cardiac arrest, and you shock them into kind of the heart back into pumping, and it's kind of like that, right? So there is some,
know that.
For some research, right, there is like suggestion that pickle juice or something that's really sour, can stimulate that kind of reconnection, or that sort of repulsing nature of that central nervous fatigue that happens, that could cause cramp. So but the thing is, it's kind of temporary, and it doesn't last very long. So, say for example, if you're like 3 hours into a 4 hour race and you go smashing up a hill and you're like, oh my God, I've got cramp. And you can take these things called cramp fix gels that are basically like concentrated vinegar. You take that reorganizes things and your muscles go back to firing normally. And then maybe 30 minutes later, when it comes to the sprint finish, you've gone back to cramping again. So you kind of have to take quite a bit of it, or maybe, I don't know. I did actually see a picture of Lachlan Morton drinking pickle juice, obviously in some event. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. Just like drinking a jar of pickle juice with the, what do you call them? Little gherkins in them.
Okay. Interesting. What's the last one I have? And then if there's anything else you want to hit on, the athlete who had asked us about the timing with eating when he only can ride after dinner. And so he obviously would struggle with a full stomach. And this is similar to the athlete you were talking about. He never feels, what could he do in terms of calories so that he's not eating less, because that would not be optionally be losing weight, without having to eat so much after dinner that he feels poorly? Would you recommend them eating more before dinner, maybe at lunch, or are these calories wasted? And it's kind of encapsulates everything that we've talked about.
Yeah, and it's all to do with timing and where you can get the most amount of calories in that isn't going to A, affect his training, and then B, affect his sleep. And obviously the priority being fueling his performance and then recovering him as quickly as possible. It would depend on what he's having for his dinner, but it could be that he could have half before and half afterwards. Obviously people like to eat their evening meals, say with their families, and that's just when that's when they would like to schedule in their eating time. But if it works better for them to have a bigger meal beforehand, or like have quite a substantial pre-training snack, again, depending on where his meals fit in throughout the day, then he could have like a smaller evening meal after that and like enjoy the time with his family if that was the thing.
That's one thing I brought up in the email to him of like, hey, I understand like dinner is family time. So, how does this work? Can you eat earlier and skip dinner, but be there in person? Or is that not a good idea?
Oh, that's so grim, Brendan. Who puts somebody at a dinner table and tells them not to eat?
No, I mean, like if you're going to go ride in 20 minutes, I wouldn't. I mean, I've been at Thanksgiving and done, like big early brunch breakfast and then wait 3 hours to know I'm going to ride. And so people are like having like a second meal and I'm just like kind of chilling there. I don't really like, I would want to go ride.
Oh, see, I can't.
It's also
a
really
people.
Bad idea to plan a ride on Thanksgiving when your family's there. They might yell at you. So I'm not, life lesson.
Go away and peel some potatoes. What was going to say there? Yeah, I can't. I have an inability to sit around people and not have something to eat. It invariably means that I rob whoever is eating's food. But I find it really difficult to not eat when people are eating.
So that's good. Well, I'm glad those are your suggestions, because we had this conversation early September and he emailed back and said, hey, I waited to reply to try some of these. They worked and it's going well. Really appreciate it. Thanks to you and Ellen. So,
oh, wow.
Any last topics with respect to time? I think we're kind of up at
it. But it's going to have to come up at another day, right? So like this whole discussion around ketones, right? Can I bring this up?
You can bring it up. Let's go. I mean, we can have another
and
podcast.
It's probably a conversation that we need to have, right?
So I don't know if you read the comments. People were like, Ellen needs to be a regular. I'm like,
Ellen
has a life and doesn't want to talk to me all the time.
Ellen needs to sort out her environment before she can be a regular. Anyway, I got the mic.
That's good.
So there's a whole discussion around them, and God, we'll just have to keep it for another day because I just need to get so many things.
Let me ask you this: what's the number one thing that's like when you're thinking about ketones? Where is your mind going with that?
What does the research say?
I think the
And
research,
like, yeah.
yeah. So I think a lot of it is obviously, since it's so new, is anecdotal. I think the research, there's some for it and there's some against it. And my big thing is that we need to make sure if we're using research, we're actually looking at highly trained athletes. Like, what does this
Mhm.
do to them in their actual training and racing? I think the interesting thing is that there are the word of how many pro tour teams use this, but they tend to use it for recovery. Whereas this is a product that I probably promote maybe 5 or 6 things that I have found that work for me that I'm willing to talk about and that I like to try and help these brands. Number one, because I'm selfish and I want them to never go away because I'm obsessed with their products.
Yeah.
But I'll say, usually it works for 6 or 7 out of 10 people. There's always outliers that things just don't work or they don't like it or it feels weird or whatever.
Yeah.
Ketones is one of the first things where I would say 9 out of 10 people say, oh my God, this is insane. And it's everyone from a road race, definitely the long gravel people. I have a bunch of athletes that they're like, you always take these every morning. And I thought it was BS. And they're business people. And like, I am like keyed up and locked in to work, which is, there is going to be some really crazy. I'm probably not supposed to be talking about this. Yeah, actually, I'm not going to talk about it because I might get in trouble. But we'll just say neuro mapping has become more readily accessible outside of like big labs. And we are going to see some crazy brain activation stuff when people take ketones. And I'm trying to get
Yeah.
myself involved in this because I'm freaking hyped about it. And some of the names that are getting involved with these brands, it's just like people are seeing. I've had pro teams who have been like, hey, man, I've seen you've been taking these data. Like, I'm looking through some of the research and I'm talking to other people, and it seems like everyone's going to need to be taking these. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Now, see, from my perspective, right, I kind of have to hold my hand up and say that I got a little bit confused. No, I didn't get confused. I got a little bit yeah, maybe confused
Fit.
is the right way to say it, right? Because there's obviously the different types at the moment that are
Yeah.
being heavily marketed. You've got the delta G ketone esters, and then you've got the HVMN, which are ketone diols, right? Now you've written a blog about this,
Yeah.
and then and there, I think transparency
It's not out
for
there.
all of this is kind of missing a little bit, and
Yeah.
the performance benefits or the recovery benefits. Obviously, if you listen to Brendan Egan talk about this, like he's very clear that there is a threshold for ketone ketone bodies circulating in the blood for there to be of any performance benefit, and the level at which your ketone levels bodies are rising with the different types of products is so different. But and then the different effects that you can feel off of either ones, and I feel like I've been kind of blindsided a little bit by the different companies marketing exploits and the stuff that they can use on their website rather than the actual research. And only by going through Brendan Egan's fully detailed, like hundreds of studies that he went through, I think it's like 44 pages long, this research report on the different types of ketones and everything, did I actually say, oh my God, I got this totally wrong. That's not to say that with the products where the ketones don't rise as much in the blood, that they don't have their benefits. Like I've seen people get like really amazing sleep after using them for a couple of days. But from my perspective, I would like to see more studies done on the types of ketones that aren't ketone esters that are being sold to be the same thing.
Yes. So the compounds, there needs to be clarification on all the compounds. Also, a point that when we're talking about performance benefits with ketone levels rising, everybody, more is not always better. And this was the one thing that I really respected about some of the people I was talking to, because I said, I was thinking more is better. Like, no, if you have too many ketone bodies in your blood, that's when you can start to inhibit glycolysis. And there are people that have been in podcasts that say, oh, well, the problem with ketones is that you can't go hard. I will dispel that is total BS. I've done megawatt and mega for me watts versus non-ketone performing watts, have had no problem, have done crits with 7 minutes of FRC, no problem, and that's a 1 hour event.
Yeah. Now, see, but you see, the research doesn't support that, like that you can get a high intensity benefit from ketone ingestion, from acute ketone ingestion, unless you take it with an acid buffering, or an acid buffering
what
agent.
I'm wondering is that the amount of ketones taken, if you have too many, it's a bad thing. If you have the right level, I haven't seen any performance hindrance at all.
Yeah.
So I think it's super early days. And I think one thing we need to remember, we just did 30 minutes of a podcast on a thing called carbohydrates that have been around forever. And we are still learning the best way to do everything. And we are still dialing everything in. Ketones are so new. A lot of cyclists listening to this, we were in a time when it was 60 grams an hour. That was the most carbs that we could absorb. And what do you know? We have way more. And now we're saying maybe we're going too high. Like, we're still dialing in a macronutrient. So we're in the early days. Ketones, definitely test on yourself before a race. If you have not tried it, I'll put a link in the show notes. I would be surprised if you didn't say, wow. It's worth trying. It's also super expensive. So I think other athletes are like, okay, that's just not even in my budget and I need to wait. That's another factor. If you have money to spend.
They're also like, let's just call a spade a spade.
They taste amazing.
Vile.
Yeah. Horrible.
They're vile.
Horrible. And it's actually kind of, I think, an acquired taste. I don't hate it, but I will say sometimes it packs a different punch. I'm just like, oof, ow. Yeah.
What ones do you use?
I use Delta G. I use the raw one because it's the most ester.
Tactical ones.
Tactical, and just to clarify, tactical and the ketone, the gold bottle, are the exact same product. The tactical is placed in a plastic bottle so you can put it in your jersey and you don't have to worry about crushing glass. I love the glass bottle one because it's more like fancy and elegant and like it's sitting there, and I love the glass. It's just the aesthetic. Rip the label off and have this pure glass little beaker of ketones. It's like, I want you.
Now, see, I've obviously been trying the other one, the HMN product, and do you know what? It actually tastes kind of nice.
It's not bad. It tastes like alcohol.
It's not bad. But then the tactical ones showed up there the other day, and I tried that yesterday, and I was like,
oh
my God, I want to spew everywhere.
Yeah, I did. I got into ketones when people sent me the HVMN. It didn't do anything for me. I was really bummed. And so I was like, ketones are stupid. And then I tried Delta G and I was like, oh, and the feed has a really good article that I put bits in the blog that I wrote about my experience with it. Just the difference in what the compounds are. And try it. I mean, some people have said HVMN works for them. I think it's total BS. And just looking at some of the studies too, I think it's kind of dangerous to be giving to some people because of if they do start to feel a little drunk, you don't want to be on a bike and descending a mountain. So
yeah, not a great place to be.
No. Hey, Ellen, thank you. We'll put links. If you guys need help with nutrition, you should talk to Ellen on a more personal level, get with her about what she can help you with for your events. And don't wait until February to start dialing in things for next season. I would be getting my nutrition dialed so that I'm fueling properly in the off season, because that's when a ton of your gains are going to be made, strength gains, and just get in early so that you can work with someone and she'll know you like full stop by the time it comes racing season. So any last closing words?
Yeah, no, I do like how you rounded up there about the whole getting your macros or getting that one macronutrient correct before going looking at any supplements. And it's the same with caffeine, bicarb, ketones, all the rest of them. More often than not, it's the timing and type of all those carbs, fats, and protein that can make the biggest impact on your performance. And so often you see people taking these ergogenic aids that have no idea what they're doing and have no idea how to be structuring them throughout fueling schedule. Obviously, that's part of the work that I do with athletes, but the basics have to be right, and that solid foundation.
Before you try to
can add
optimize
those bits
everything,
on.
get the basics in. That's a really
100%.
good point to end on. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Leave us a review. Tell us what you loved. Tell us what you disagree with. Leave some comments below. Share it with a friend. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.